Welcome to Railguns and Dragons. My name is Vince. I am one of your hosts. I'm sitting alongside Rob. Rob, how you doing today?
Excellent. I'm very excited for this podcast.
Me too. This is our first episode here, and today we're going to talk a little bit about ourselves because, this is our podcast, so we want to talk about ourselves because it's all about us. No, it's not. It's not really about us. It's about Palladium Fantasy 2nd Edition. Right, Rob?
Exactly. So, Vince, how did you get involved in Palladium 2nd Edition?
Well, my Palladium journey actually started in the late 80s into the early 90s. When 2nd Edition AD&D came out, I really didn't like it. And I know that makes you angry because you're a big 2nd Edition AD&D fan. But that's not what we're about here today. And I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to go back to playing 1st Edition. And then one of my buddies, I still remember the day, his name was Desmond. He's like, dude, come over to Brian's house, and we're going to play a game called Palladium Fantasy. And I'm like, what's that? He goes, imagine Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, but on crack. I said, what? He's like, yeah, the game is just whacked, and it's like it's on crack. You're going to love it. I was like, all right. So I went over to his house, and I started playing Fantasy, which was just called Fantasy back then. They didn't call it Palladium Fantasy, it's just Fantasy. And we played a couple games of it. I was a little confused at first because they have, the parry rules and stuff like that. And I'm just like, okay. And, the DM, Brian, he was nice. He guided me through how to play the game. And Desmond helped me make my character, which took quite a while to do because I was really picky about certain things. And it can take a while to make character. But I played the game, and I was just like, dude, this is awesome. And he goes, it doesn't end here. I go, what do you mean? He's like, there's Riffs, and there's Robotech, and there's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And I'm like, what? Wait, what? So that's when I kind of dove in and played. Mostly I played Fantasy, but we did play a lot of Turtles, Robotech, and then we jumped into Riffs for a little while. And then we kind of updated when it came to 2nd Edition later on. So I play 2nd Edition and 1st. I think I probably favor 1st a little bit more than 2nd because it reminds me of the good old days of AD&D on crack. But that's my story. What about you, Rob?
Like everybody else, old AD&D was my first introduction to role-playing. And then my second major introduction to role-playing was actually Riffs.
Oh.
And I do remember it was a magical day, a comic book store. Okay. And yeah, I was like 12. I was like maybe 13, 14 years old. I look over on a shelf, and there's that beautiful Riffs cover.
Oh, yeah, God. Yeah.
I've heard some people refer to it as the Butts edition because of the scantily clad women on the cover. But anyway, that piqued my interest, and I had to have that book. So I got it, and I loved the I loved the setting, I loved the rules. And then I was introduced to 2nd Edition Fantasy.
Yeah.
And I was in a huge campaign with 2nd Edition Fantasy for the longest time. Played a lot of great characters. Unfortunately, though, we did not play in the traditional Palladium world. It's like the game master had his own campaign setting. So as far as the world books, even though I have most of the world books, I've read a lot of them. I've only played in the traditional Palladium setting a few times. Okay. Then when I was in the Navy, it was all about Riffs, and me and a bunch of guys, we had a bunch of Riffs books in our lockers, and one guy had lived off base, so we would go to his house every weekend when we were in port and freaking play Riffs all day.
Nice.
Then, like I said, over the last several years, I've jumped back into Fantasy off and on throughout the years. But to be honest, it's been a while since I've had a hardcore fantasy game, which I really would like to get back into.
I ran a fantasy game for quite a long time here on my channel, so the Evil DM. But that's here nor there. Anyway, but it's funny because when I lived in Connecticut, Groton, which was right by the naval base, which you might be familiar with. I don't know if you're familiar with that naval base.
I've never been to that one.
Oh, okay. There was a lot, obviously, of Navy housing there. And I would say when I was there, half the group was always Navy guys.
Oh, yeah.
It was just I would go to someone's house. It was in the Navy. What do they call it? The Navy housing, I guess they call it. I don't know what.
It's just military housing.
Yeah, because it was all just Navy people living there. I'm just like, damn, these guys got it good. And we would go and play different games and everything. A lot of times it was a Palladium Fantasy. A lot of times it was Riffs. So you guys really like the riffs and the fantasy.
I don't know what it is about it. You know what I think it is? Because softcover books. Softcover books, they're easier to store in lockers and things of that nature. That I think that might be
Really?
maybe one of the elements.
Never thought of it that way.
Yeah. Because you have very little space on a ship. You have like a locker. And so something that can like easily bend, versus a hard cover is just, you can kind of squeeze it in just a little bit better.
All right. Well, I mean, take it from Rob, a Navy guy. He found a way to get those books on the ship and play a game. Awesome. So Railguns and Dragons was a name concept that I came up with a while ago, and I was going to do a podcast about Palladium, but it just didn't really come to fruition. And I opened up a website, and I have a whole blog for it. And it kind of just sat there. Every once in a while, I put some like updates from my games and stuff on there. But talking to Rob, and with Rob's excitement and willing to sit here and entertain me, we decided to do this podcast, Railguns and Dragons. And I know it sounds more of a let's add everything in from Palladium type name, because Railguns comes from the riffs, the Dragons comes from the fantasy, but they could be intertwined into each other because the way Palladium is built with the Megaverse. And as an ambassador, and I think you're probably an ambassador too, it's not that hard to become one. You know how all the games just kind of intermix with one another and kind of flow together. You don't really need a conversion book I know they came out with conversion books, but you really don't need the conversion books to play together, at least in my opinion.
Well, I mean, you could do like a lot of mental adjustments, but like I said, I have all the conversion books and stuff like that, but a lot of it is like, especially if you're going into Rifts, or because Rifts has, of course, mega damage and other considerations, and everything is so amped up in Rifts that you need to kind of have a little bit of a filter if you want it to kind of go back to like an SDC setting. So yeah, there's a little bit of number crunching, and there's also optional rules. For example, let's say there's some people out there that just hate mega damage.
Yeah.
So they want to convert everything to SDC, and that's cool. So there are calculations for that, and I'm trying to remember. I think it's in the Rifts Game Master's Guide. So if you want to bring something from Rifts into Palladium, because like I said, and like Vince said, it's like, with the Rifts, anything can happen. So if you really think about it, Rifts is sort of like has become the spoke for a larger wheel.
Yeah.
And from Rifts, you can either go to someplace else or something can come to Rifts, because it's like the crossroads of the Megaverse.
I think you described it pretty well there. Yeah, I think that's pretty much what it is. You're right.
Yeah. So
the approach for this podcast, we've kind of pretty much said what it's going to be. Palladium Fantasy 2nd Edition. We want to focus on 2nd Edition Fantasy. There are a lot of people out there that play Fantasy. And while looking around, we're like, there's not a lot of people that, or I shouldn't say a lot of people, there's not a lot of podcast-wise when it comes to Palladium Fantasy. I mean, there's riffs, and there's someone there's a couple YouTube channels that go over everything, but no one place just focuses on one thing. Everybody's kind of to the left, to the right, the center, going backwards, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's how they do their scheduled videos or podcasts, and they do whatever they feel is right for their audience. We, myself and Rob is the we, decided that we're just going to focus on Palladium Fantasy for now. And in the future, when we kind of, I guess, I don't know what the word for it is, ramp down, or I don't know, what word would you call it, Rob?
Well, it'd be a while because there's a lot of material.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like if you added all the 1st edition books, 2nd edition books, Rifters, I mean, that's quite a bit of material to go over.
Right. Well, I think word I was looking for, wind down.
Yeah, why not? Yeah.
And then the audience is like, well, we'll let the audience just drive where we go next. And if their next thing is to go to riffs, then we will jump into riffs. If their next thing is to go into, I'll pick some.
Heroes Unlimited.
Yeah. Heroes Unlimited, or anything like that, or Dead Rain, for example, which is another great setting, or Beyond the Supernatural.
Oh yeah, perfect. Yeah,
which we can bring on the host, which I'm friends with the host from the Beyond the Supernatural website that maintains that. He would probably gladly come on and chat for a long time because he loves talking.
Nightbane. Don't forget Nightbane.
Nightbane's one setting. I'm going off on a tangent now. Nightbane is one setting that I really wanted to play. Like, I have all the books of Nightbane, but I've never actually played in a game of Nightbane. Everyone's always like, no, that's just a stupid vampire ripoff game. I'm like, no, it's not.
No. You know what? Somebody actually made a way better description of Nightbane. Imagine if you're playing Hellraiser,
Yeah.
but the Cenobites are the good guys.
Yeah.
That is what Nightbane is.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know what it is, and they think it's like either a vampire ripoff or, as my friend said, imagine the show Angel, but the nightclub's an angel. That's what it is. I'm like, that's not really what it is.
No, that doesn't sound like Nightbane.
I'm just like, whatever.
Somebody didn't read the book.
Exactly. They did not read the book. But anyway, Palladium Fantasy 2nd Edition, that's what we're going to be doing. So let's kind of go over the game itself. So what is Palladium Fantasy 2nd Edition, Rob?
Well, Palladium 2nd Edition, Palladium itself, and it's like we can't escape this comparison, but it was, of course, inspired by Advanced Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
And it just basically added a whole bunch of layers to it. It was like basically a lot of metal stuff was added to fantasy. Things that while the parents were concentrating on keeping their kids from playing AD&D, you could sneak in Palladium Fantasy. They wouldn't know they wouldn't know any better, right? Even though if you read the material of, fantasy, I mean, they're openly talking about demons, possession. Anybody that's ever played a wizard, you did the Black Cauldron.
Hell, there's the witch class that basically talks about a pact with Satan.
Exactly, demons and devils. It's like the Palladium Fantasy is the heavy metal cover of, like, if AD&D is like Tolkien, right? Palladium Fantasy adds that heavy metal aspect to it.
Or maybe AD&D is metal and Palladium is death metal.
Yeah.
How's that? I think
there
that
you
works.
Go. So basic D&D would be Tolkien. AD&D would be metal, and then fantasy Palladium would be death metal. Okay,
there you go.
I can roll with that.
Perfect.
Exactly.
So let's talk about the setting. There is a setting involved when it comes to playing Palladium Fantasy, and it has its own world, but it leaves it open enough that you can actually kind of find an area and play in it and not have to worry about the actual world itself. At least that was my take on the game. What about you, Rob?
Well, I mean, the world is very interesting. Like I said, I've only played in the Palladium world a few times over the years, because it was always like the guys I was playing with always had their own campaign settings.
Everybody does that.
But to be honest with you, I like what I see in the Palladium books, in the world books, and I would personally love to run a campaign in the Palladium world. Because you got the Wolfen Empire, you have like all of these very analogous, like, to history. Like the one main empire is very reminiscent of, I think of Rome or something like that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of intrigue and things of that nature. So the Palladium world is a rich universe, and through this podcast, I want to educate myself on these books more. So this has given me a really good reason to deep dive into all of the world books and talk about it.
Yeah, there's no reason why this podcast can't be educational for people that listen and for the hosts themselves. Because we're going to dive into this stuff. We're going to kind of get in there with tools and, dig in there. And all you're going to see is our shoes hanging out the back of the book. And
exactly.
You can picture that, right? And it's going to be a rift itself, the book. But we're going to be in there. We're going to get in there deep, and we're going to look at all this stuff and talk about it. But today's just kind of one of those introductory shows, just kind of get some of the little basic stuff out of the way. And when you pick up the book, I mean, you're going to love the cover. You're going to look at it, and then you're going to go into looking at creating characters. So we're going to talk about character creation in a minute, but we wanted to talk about the attributes for this game, how they're different from other games, and how it actually works. So let's start with the attributes. On page 14, it goes over the 8 attributes and the bonuses that we have here in the book. So if you grab your second edition book, whether you have a PDF because you bought it off drive-through, or you have the actual soft cover, hardcover book, I have that one as well. It has a lot of good pictures in it when they did some of the updates, and they try to correct some things. And I say that because they didn't correct everything, but, that's just how it rolls. All right. So when you roll for your attributes, and I'll go over those in just a second. Actually, I'll let Rob start that one, but I was going to talk about this first. You roll 3d6. Now, whether your GM tells you to roll 3d6 down the line and assign them, or assign them however you want, well, I should back up a second then, because that's only for humans. When it comes to humans, you can put it wherever you want, but then I guess when it comes to other races, they have a specific way to do it. Am I correct there?
Yeah, you're correct. I think that might be a benefit that humans have is simply, hey, I can put my numbers wherever I want.
Right.
And
the different races have a different way to. You can't really assign it, because I remember that was one of the complaints my group had when we played, was because some of them weren't playing humans. Like one of the players was human, and he was like fine with it, but then some people played an elf, and this and that, and they're like, "Why can't I just put wherever I want?" Because you have 5 dice in one thing, you can't do that. So. All right, Rob, start us off with the attributes.
Okay, so the attributes are intelligence, mental endurance, mental affinity, physical strength, physical prowess, physical endurance, physical beauty, and speed. Now, notice the in AD&D, this would have been controversial because, we have physical beauty here. And remember what everybody hates in AD&D? Comeliness, but here it is one of your attributes.
Yeah.
So that doesn't bother me at all, because to me there is a difference between somebody with natural charisma and physical beauty.
Well, I mean, they have physical beauty, which would replace charisma, so to speak, if you're talking about AD terms.
Yeah. Well, I think because mental affinity in this game is basically your character's personal charm and charisma, natural leadership. Physical beauty is strictly, how good you look.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So IQ, starting at the top. Now, one of the things I always kind of thought about IQ, whether you're talking about fantasy or Dungeons and Dragons, right? So if you break it down into kind of the IQ score. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you have, let's say, a 12 IQ, well, you can say, okay, well, this guy has 120 IQ, right? So if you have an 18, then, your IQ is like 180. So to me, that always gave me a
Where did you get that from, ask?
Well, I read that. I think I read that somewhere, but I actually kind of came up with that concept kind of a long time ago on my own. And I was like, this actually kind of corresponds to like IQ, So somebody because think about it, somebody with what's considered average
100.
is like 9, 10, 11, 12. Those are like your basic average scores. And when you have, let's say, a 12 or like 11 IQ, well, that's the equivalent of like 110 IQ.
Yeah, 120, 11, 130, 100. Yeah, I get what you're saying now. Yeah.
Yeah. And think about it. Somebody who has a 20 IQ would have a 200 IQ.
Yeah.
So that kind of, to me, that's a great guide for how smart your character actually really is. It might be oversimplistic, but it's worked for me on as a guide.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know if you read that or you made that up. It's actually pretty cool because it does work thinking in my head about that. So
yeah, and I could have sworn, like I said, I know I came up with it at one time, but then I read it. So other people I think have thought of the same thing as me. So it's not like I came up with it, like some original thought. I think it's like just one of those things that a lot of people have already thought about, and I could have sworn I've read it somewhere, but I can't remember exactly where I read it. So
also when you roll the dice for rolling these things, when I said 3d6, some with humans on a 16, 17, 18, and I believe other characters can do this as well, depending. You can get to roll a d6 again and add it to the attribute.
When you roll a 16, it's like when you roll a 16, 17, or 18, you get to roll another d6. And I believe, and if you roll another 6, you get to roll again.
Yeah.
That's how it is. Yeah.
I'm on page 14. I'm looking. If the 6 is rolled, the player adds the 6 to his character attributes and gets to roll a d6 again and add that number to his total attributes.
Yeah. So you can get some really gonzo characters with Palladium in general. Now, the beauty of it is, especially with your physical stuff, with your physical attributes, you can raise those depending on what skills you.
Yes.
So one of the things that I've done, like especially if I'm not like going out of my way to play like a warrior, like more of an intellectual, I will always put my lowest stats in my physical stuff and then pump up those physical attributes with the right skills.
Yeah, that is a smart idea to do that, because then you can always just raise them by taking skills to make your character stronger, faster, whatever, more agile, but you can't make him smarter. I mean, you could with, packs and things like that in the game. You can make yourself more beautiful. Better looking is the term, or more beautiful if you're a dummy like me.
Yeah.
And you can make yourself faster too, by just taking some type of like running or something like that.
Oh yeah. There's a lot of things that you can build up your speed, man. Oh, like especially, I know it's like especially in rifts, man. You can get some outrageous attributes, and I believe so. You can also do that, and of course, fantasy. So.
And don't be discouraged if you get low scores. If you get average scores, it doesn't mean it's the end of the world for your character. It just means you just don't get a lot of bonuses. And eventually you will get those bonuses through playing the game when it comes to equipment or something. So it's not the end of the world.
It's not. I mean, it's like, like Vince said, you get pretty much a one-time bonus. Like, for instance, you have a certain IQ, you get a one-time IQ to skill bonus. Right. But it's not as if you're rolling your IQ during the game. It's pretty much. Now, one of the things I will say though, just because you're not using your stats in a mechanical way all the time doesn't mean you shouldn't be using your stats in a role play way. So, in other words, if you have a 6 intelligence, I know sometimes you want to try to play somebody with a 6 intelligence. Or if you have somebody with like a physical strength of 9, don't try to be the barbarian and run out there and try to lift boulders over your head. So the attributes, even if they're not a mechanical thing, they can still guide you in the role play aspect, because that's telling you what your strengths and weaknesses are. That's telling you what shape your character is. So it's still a valuable tool, even if you're not using them constantly.
So it's an overview of that. Let's talk a little bit about alignments. And one of the things I really love about Palladium is the alignment system. I think the alignment that Kevin has made up for Palladium in general is outstanding, with all the examples that he gives. And I love the fact that he starts it off by saying neutral. There is no such thing as absolutely neutral. Thank you, Kevin. No one can be absolutely true neutral, and I hated that alignment in Dungeons & Dragons. I don't know about you, Rob, but I really hate true neutral.
Listen, I 100% agree with you. Neutral has always bothered me for the longest time. Matter of fact, when I used to run basic, because you have, in like basic, you only had like chaos, law, and neutrality, right? And not to go on a tangent here, but one of the reasons they did that, when they actually created, the only reason they made it law, neutral, and chaotic is because of the satanic panic. Because they were trying to avoid anything that had anything to do with like so-called morality. They didn't want to have the word evil there.
Yeah.
That was like the big thing. Now everybody filtered those alignments through their head. It's like chaos is evil.
Yeah.
Law is good. And the neutrality was just kind of like just open for argument. Like what the hell is neutrality? What does that even mean? And I didn't like the chaos aspect and the lawful aspect, because I'm like, chaotic to what? Compared to what? Lawful compared to what? It was so vague. And then of course then you go into AD&D, and then now see, this is like, for instance, principled. That's lawful good. Okay? But here's the difference. While in AD&D, alignments just created a lot of arguments, because people would be constantly arguing about, well, what is neutral good? What is neutral evil? What is chaos? But here there is no argument. It spells it out exactly what each alignment stands for.
With great examples, in my opinion.
Exactly. There's no ambiguity. It's telling you, for if you're unprincipled, you have a high regard for life and freedom. You keep your word of honor. You lie and cheat if necessary. Will not kill an unarmed foe. So there's no sitting there arguing about what you would do in your alignment because it's already there for you. It tells you. Now, the strange part is in AD&D, I always saw alignment as kind of like a zone.
Yeah.
Where it was like, because really, the only time you really needed to worry too much about alignment in AD&D is like if you were a paladin or a cleric or somebody that basically their entire class was about their alignment.
True.
And the other thing was, let's say, if you were dealing with an item that, like, let's say only lawful good people can pick up the sword without, getting a D6.0 damage or whatever. So to me, that's the only time alignment was really, truly important in AD&D, because the problem was it was so vague that it was hard to judge if somebody was being, well, are you being neutral good or are you being chaotic good?
Yeah, exactly.
But here it spells it out for you.
So let's just go over them
yeah.
real quick before we jump into the examples. But
exactly. Okay.
So we have our good alignments, which are principle and good. Well, principle is good. And then we got scrupulous, good. And then we go into our selfish alignments, but they're not necessarily evil, so to speak. They're unprincipled selfish. And then we have an anarchist selfish, which in my opinion leans towards a little bit of an evil side to it. But I don't know, maybe a neutral evil comparison, or I'm trying to figure that one out. That one, anarchist usually gets me as maybe they would be more like a chaotic good. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, anarchist, I think, is what replaces true neutrality.
Yeah.
In this. So this is how I've always seen this. Okay, being neutral means simply, and I always like to use the term selfish versus neutral. And selfish does not mean greedy. Okay, selfish simply means that you put your wants, desires, your mission, whatever, above morality. In other words, whatever you need to do to accomplish what you want to do is what's important.
True.
So, like for instance, with the druids, right? In AD&D, it's like a druid has to be neutral. And there was always this argument about, well, the druid needs to do bad things every once in a while in order to keep a neutral balance or some crap like that.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, this is stupid. Because can you imagine if a druid, let's say, was looking down at a village, right? And let's say the village was logging, and there was a tribe of orcs, okay? And one day the druid is helping the villagers, right? But then he's like, you know what? I need to keep the balance. So now I'm going to go and help the orcs attack the village to keep a so-called cosmic balance. The only thing that would happen is that the villagers would hunt down that druid and kill him.
Uh-huh.
Because they would not give a crap about some sort of philosophical debate about cosmic balance.
Exactly.
Okay? But you know what the druid would think? The druid would say, which group is more likely to keep the forest relatively healthy? Which group is least likely to destroy everything, right? Which group can I deal with? Can he make a deal with the human village? Or is he going to try to deal with the orcs, who are known, if you go classic, are just, evil engines of destruction that destroy everything around them? So that's going to be the consideration of the druid. That's what makes the druid selfish, not because he's greedy, because he puts his agenda above so-called morality. Now, with anarchist, in a lot of things, the anarchist, I think, is kind of doing the same thing. In other words, whatever their agenda is what comes first, right?
Yeah, they put their self over everybody else, it looks like, yeah.
Yeah. And like I said, and it's not about greed. It's about putting, think about it. When somebody says you're self-centered, think about that. That's what it is. You are self-centered. The only thing that matters is you and your wants and desires. and everything else is simply tools that lead to that. And that could be good, because think about it. You could theoretically, what if your wants and desires happen to be good, right?
Generally, they're not.
What if it? Yeah. I mean, it could be that way. In other words, it's sort of like you've heard that term, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right?
Yeah.
And so you're the kind of guy that will do whatever it takes, whether it's good actions or bad actions, if you feel that your ultimate goal will be achieved. And you might think that ultimate goal is actually good for everyone.
Yeah.
So, and so that's the thing. It's like, and they're hard. So an anarchist person, unless you really know them as a person, can be very hard to peg down what they're going to do next, because it all depends on what their motivations are. Like for instance, most people, wouldn't kill somebody, to even accomplish a goal that they want, right? That's just something that most people will not do. They will not murder somebody to simply accomplish a goal.
No, okay? Most people will not.
But an anarchist, right? But an anarchist might.
They will.
Yeah, I mean, and if you're in the way of their agenda, you're just an obstacle, and it has nothing to do with good or evil.
As long as you're not innocent, they'll pretty much kill you. But they're gonna harm you. I mean, if you're an innocent and you're in their way, yeah, they're gonna kill you because you're now in their way, and they're gonna harm you at first. If you don't get the message, then they're gonna kill you.
Yeah, like it says in number 3, not likely to kill an unarmed foe, but will certainly knock out, attack, and eat up an unarmed foe.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he says never kill an innocent, but may harm and kidnap.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's pretty edgy. So
he's the edgelord. No, I'm kidding.
yeah. I mean, if you think about it, he might be.
So the evil alignments, we got 3 of them: miscreant, aberrant, and diabolic. Yeah. Diabolic.
Diabolic. Yeah, it's diabolic.
Okay. Diabolic. Diabolic. I don't know. Whatever we want to call it. But I don't normally allow these 3 alignments in any of my games because I don't like evil characters in my games. Mm-hmm. I know someone out there is screaming, well, player agency, it's not fair. No, when you play a game, a fantasy game like this, whether it's Palladium Fantasy, Dungeons and Dragons, or, whatever you want to call it, RuneQuest, for example, or whatever, you're playing heroes. You're not playing, unless your game is geared towards, evil characters, you're not playing evil characters. I don't care what argument they come to the table with. I'm not allowing evil characters in my campaign. Sure, selfish, anarchist, unprincipled, fine. That should give you enough freedom to play a character that you want between the 5 alignments?
Right.
No, 4.
Now, of course, the AD&D equivalent is neutral evil, lawful evil, and chaotic evil.
Right.
Those are the equivalents.
Yep.
Now, most people, because they say, well, if you're going to allow any evil character in your campaign, the most obvious would be like aberrant. Would be because it's like aberrant. They're the lawful evil alignment. They have honor. Like for instance, they never kill for pleasure. Always keep his word of honor. Lie and cheat to those not worthy of his respect. May or may not kill an unarmed foe. And the list goes on. Respect, honor, self-discipline. Never betray a friend. See, that's the thing. It's like aberrant is, yes, they're evil, but they're evil that can be managed, and they're evil that can work easily with a group. That's the thing. It's like these others, like when you're talking about miscreant and diabolical, you can't trust those.
No.
You can't trust those characters at all. Like I said, only the aberrant, and even the aberrant could ultimately lead you to your doom, because remember, they're still evil.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the thing. It's like, I mean, they're still going to be a-holes. Sooner or later, their true colors will shine. And it's not saying that evil characters aren't possible. I mean, one of the most famous characters of all time, Raceland from Dragonlance.
Yeah, that's true. Yep.
But think about it though. At one point, Raceland ends up breaking away from the group for long periods of time. So there was a breaking point. So and we're talking about a group that his brother was there. Right, so that was like even with that anchor, sooner or later, when you have guys like Sturm Brightblade, who is basically a paladin, and all these other super good aligned characters, and then you have that one guy, that one evil guy, sooner or later there is going to come a point where you're like, man, I don't think we can be in the same room. It's like, yeah, we're not trying to kill each other, but you're obviously have evil intentions. And if we're sitting there allowing you with our group, are we helping you with your evil plans? Because why else would you be with us? Because you obviously have some sort of evil plan in the background, turning away, and you think of us as your pawns.
Right.
And that's
some good books.
That's the thing. So, and that's one of the things that people forget is in real life, you have a choice who you want to hang out with, right?
Yeah.
If somebody comes in, because I think there's like this expectation that whatever character you come up with, everybody's just supposed to accept you and roll with it and blah, blah, blah. But really, in real life, would your characters even be in the same room together if it wasn't for the fact that you were in a game?
Sometimes I would think not, by the way people make their characters, so.
Yeah, So, and also, I always like question this. It's like, if you're going out of your way to make an evil character, well, you would think that, well, because you want to do evil things, but if you're with a bunch of good guys who are going to constantly be thwarting you at every turn or constantly trying to talk you down or get mad at you,
why would you be there?
How is that fun?
Yeah.
How is that a fun time?
Unless you were there to see that they don't accomplish their goals and you're there to screw things up without letting them know that you're there to do that.
There. Now, here's a possibility. Maybe you and the game master work this out. Maybe this is part of the plan.
That's true.
Maybe think about it, right? So maybe the dungeon master, the game master, says, hey, you know what? I like the idea of you playing an evil character, but I need you to help me guide the story from within, right?
You could do
to
that.
help steer, because you're trying to, the game master is trying to steer the party in a certain way to basically build up to some sort of climax. And but even if it's like an inside job type of thing, even if the player, you got to be careful you're not cheating the other players for the sake of pushing a particular narrative. That's the hard part. So if you're going to do this, you got to be really subtle with it. And you got to know when to freaking back away if the players push too hard against it, or if they figure out that guy's actually evil and they want to get rid of him. And you're gonna, well, I guess we tried, but but you don't want to have the game just fold because you got one guy that wants to be evil and everybody else wants to be good. I think that's a kind of a sad state of affairs.
Well, that's generally why when I start campaigns, I say, well, this is going to be a campaign for heroes.
Right.
Whether you take that how you want to take that, but it's heroes. That gives you the wiggle room to kind of play a character that you want to play, but you're going to overall be good.
Like the level that you want to go for, because like I said, I like edgy characters. I like edgy characters that basically kind of skirt, the line between law and whatever. But it needs to be, like, for instance, Han Solo. Han Solo is a great example of a character of this nature. And of course, he shot first. So think about that. I mean, think about if you're a fan of the original Star Wars, Han Solo was his Guido underneath the table.
Yeah, he did.
He never had a chance, right? And so that one scene by itself showed that Han Solo was a criminal.
Oh yeah,
he was a smuggler. He did underhanded things to get by. Yet when it came down to the nitty gritty, Han Solo was their first friends. Okay, he wasn't stabbing Luke Skywalker in the back and running off to Darth Vader and selling Luke Skywalker out for a freaking bounty. That's not what he did. He was a scoundrel.
Yeah,
with a heart of gold.
He took off, but he came back. So.
Yeah, but like I said, he came back because he felt bad. He felt guilty. He felt like a conflicted character.
Yeah, exactly.
But like I said, it's like some players they just want to watch the world burn.
That's not what the game is about, though.
I know, but that's how some players are.
All right, well let's move a step away from the alignment and step onto the character creation. Now, we're not going to go into too much detail of how the character creation works because you can obviously look in the book and read that yourself. But we were going to go over it just so we can cover it because it's one of the steps in the book. Obviously, we have 6 steps of rounding out one's character, which is actually step 6. I don't know why I said that, but you do your attributes, You figure out your hit points and your SDC. Determine if you have psionic powers. What do you feel about psionic powers in this edition of the game?
Oh, this is one of those things where you got to kind of compare it to AD&D. Psionic powers, are very controversial in that game. Some people don't mind them. So many people hate them. But when it comes to Palladium, it's part of the landscape, pure and simple. Now, of course, you could say, you know what? As an optional thing, no psionics even in a Palladium game.
Right, you could.
But that's a huge chunk of the game. I mean, that's a big chunk of the game if you totally take out psionic characters in Palladium.
Yeah,
okay?
That is true. But a lot of people just don't like the psionic powers because of the way they're handled. But I think they're handled better in Palladium than they in AD&D or any other game, to be honest. In AD&D, it always felt like if I was have a psionic person, I was playing a Jedi. I've always thought of it that way in AD&D, and I never really liked it. Thank God it was so hard to become a psionic person in AD&D. Well, at least 1E. I don't know about 2E. I know they had a supplement or a splat book or something.
Yeah.
When they made those thousands of books for the game that you love.
Now, I think the main difference, and correct me if I'm wrong, but while psionic powers flow seamlessly in with Palladium, when it comes to it was psionics in AD&T was kind of like tacked on.
Yeah.
With its own special rules.
Yeah.
But with Palladium Psionics, it's okay. PPE versus ISB, right? It's still the same exact mechanic.
Right.
It's still the exact same. But with in AD&D, it's like, okay, well, you have your Vancian magic system, and now you got this crazy attribute rolling thing that it's just like feels like it's just been tacked on to this other system, and it feels like a weird appendage just kind of grew out of your neck. It's like, hey, it might be useful, but it looks weird.
Yeah, it does. You're right. Yeah, it's a boil.
It's a psionic boil.
Yeah, pretty much. You're right. It felt very out of sorts with the game.
Yeah. But like I said, with Palladium, it's part of the landscape. It's the same system. It's the same, it flows easily along. And it's just a different source of power. That's all it is.
So once you determine your attributes, your hit points, your SDC, you're going to want to put these things in pencil, obviously, because some of these things are going to change.
Oh, yeah.
Then 100%. You go selecting your race and your OCC, which is your occupational character class. Now, I wonder where they came up with occupational character class as opposed to character class. Now, I'm wondering if when designing this game, Kevin was like, you know what? I don't want to copy TSR and just say class.
I think a lot of the decisions Kevin Siembieda made was basically trying to give unique flavor to the game to, distinguish itself from AD&D, because like I said, it's really easy to fall back on, oh, it's your class. Okay, well, so is in Dungeons and Dragons. It's the same thing. And then of course you also have your RCC, your racial character class, your occupational character class.
And they allow you in this to have like different races and exotic races and mutants and monsters. And you can use the Palladium Monsters and Animals 2nd edition for a variety of different races as long as your GM allows it. Like he may design a world where you're playing humanoids and like demi-human type characters, and you playing like I don't know, an elephant man may not fit into the vision of the campaign as much as you want to be an elephant or a turtle or whatever they call them, a tortoise. It's may not fit into the world. So just ask the GM.
Let me tell you something. The most dangerous thing a Palladium Game Master could ever say is, you can play whatever you want.
Oh, you might as well just throw the book out the window.
Because let me tell you something. Anybody that tells you can play whatever you want in a Palladium game is asking for it.
Yeah?
Okay?
Yes.
You are asking for it. Because if you go through, because there are some weird, there's some weird RCCs that, because obviously the RCC, you combine them with the OCC.
Yes,
right.
So
you'll look and it'll say, well, what can the elf, what can they play or whatever. But there's some weird ones, like various different weird fairies, monsters. Um, it's just all over the place. And of course, the most infamous, like, can you imagine if you brought in a dragon from Rift, so you're a dragon hatchling, and all of a sudden you're now, you're playing a dragon in Palladium, you know? There you go. Like I said, it's the Wild West. Man, Palladium is the Wild West.
Yeah. Once you figure out that, you do your skills, and you start selecting your skills, and you start using if some of your skills will affect some of your physical attributes, which Rob alluded to before, and you add some of the bonuses. If you have higher statistics for your intelligence, sometimes your skills will get a little bit of a boost. Pick your skills. You can also be a multicolored character class, which I don't normally play. Did you play multi-character?
Actually, you know what? I don't think there was really a well, at least in Rifts, that wasn't really a thing, because the idea was that there's so many classes already that there's no way it's like with all the options, you're gonna be able to find something you can play. Now, I think it might be different in fantasy. Like, I think you might be able to do multi-class characters, but I know in Rifts that's kind of discouraged.
Well, actually, here in this one, which is different from Palladium Fantasy 1E, multiple or split OCs are not an option at this point. Future supplements may address the possibility of changing one's OCC, but a player can never change his race. And obviously, you can never change your race. But
wish spell.
Well, you're right. That
who
would
knows?
change it.
Yeah,
but at this point in the character creation, it's either you're picking what you're picking, and that's it. Yeah. First edition actually does go over multi-classing a character, or it's more along the lines of dual classing if you think about the terms of classing.
Right. And I think maybe because they knew they were going to, because think about it, every single Palladium book that you get has at least 3, 4, 5 new character options.
Oh yeah.
Like every single one of them. So we're talking about, if you put, all of it, we're talking about hundreds of character options, and if you can't pick something out of those hundreds of options, you're not trying. But but one of the things about skills, because skills is what makes character creation slow.
Yeah, that's true.
It's like, because once you start trying to calculate your skills, this is why you should, like when I create a Palladium character, no matter, it's like, I don't put it on the character sheet yet. What I do is I work out all the details on scrap paper, and once I figure out all of the details, like how much, what percentage is this going to add, because a lot of these skills, they add to your attributes. They, some of them even add to other skills. You know what I'm saying? It's like they're like, well, if you have this skill, you get so you need to, because it can be very frustrating if every time you write it down, you're, oh man, I got this now, and now you got to erase it. It could be, it slows things down. It's very frustrating. So just do everything on a scrap piece of paper, figure out all those fine details, and then transfer it to the character sheet.
Yeah, or you can use the fantasy character generator that they put on Drive to RPG. And
you know what? I've experimented with that a little bit, but not enough.
Oh yeah, it's great.
It is? Okay.
The one for Rifts and the one for fantasy, so many headaches. I mean, it's on Excel. It's like an Excel sheet that's locked, but it does clear up a lot of stuff.
I do wish, because I was like a big fan of Hero Lab. Did you ever use Hero Lab?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, I had a ton of stuff on Hero Lab, like for instance, Mutants and Masterminds. I used to play a lot of Mutants and Masterminds, especially like 3rd edition. And it's like, when you're just clicking, and it all calculates everything.
Yeah, it's great.
I would like a kind of a Hero Lab version for Palladium.
We may get that eventually. I know Kevin in the past was very anti-internet app PDF, but I mean, things have changed. And now that we have Sean, I can't think of his last name offhand, and I apologize for that.
You mean from Sean from Savage Worlds?
Yeah.
Sean Hannity? Or no, not Sean Hannity.
The host on Fox News?
No. I know who it is.
Yeah.
I can't believe I said Sean Hannity.
It's okay. That's what I was looking at, like, Rob?
Sean Hannity.
Yeah, Sean. Now that Sean's kind of like in
Sean Patrick something.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. now that he's in the loop with making decisions and everything with Kevin, and Kevin's kind of slowly passing this torch to him, it seems like, I think we'll get to see something like Your Hero Life, or at least something close.
Well, here's the thing. Okay, if it is, it's going to be for Savage Rifts. I happen to be in a Savage Rifts game right now, and I'll be honest with you, it's like I play it, it's okay, but it feels like a kind of a shallow experience compared to Palladium.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay? If that makes any sense.
It does.
Now, there's certain things that I've been inspired to do from the Savage Worlds, Savage Rifts. For instance, I've modified the Mega Damage SDC stuff because of what they kind of did in Savage Rifts. Now, have you read any of the Savage World stuff?
So, yeah, I played Savage Worlds a bunch of times. I've got a whole bunch of different editions of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I am kind of working on a modification for that. But other than that, it feels like it just doesn't feel the same. It feels like it's a shallower game, you know?
Well, we're not really here to judge Savage Rifts.
Yeah.
It's just not my
sorry about that, guys.
Yes.
if you're
It's not my cup of tea, Savage Worlds. I mean, I played it.
Yeah.
It's fun, but not me. I'm here for Palladium. I love Palladium.
Right.
So after you get done with all that stuff, equipment and money, and then you round out your character by picking like your alignments and understanding how the leveling system works, like your name and what you look like and your gender and anything like that. And if you want to include an insanity, they're more than well happy to include that for you, but I wouldn't suggest doing that.
Now one of the things with when it comes to Palladium characters is this is what I tell people, because especially when you look at some of these books, are pretty thick, have a lot of information in it, and I would say just know what your character can do.
Right.
Don't worry about anything else. Okay. And the thing about it is, a lot of times, like these Palladium characters, and the word that I would use is they're very snowflakey. In other words, they're very unique.
Oh, okay.
From each other.
Snowflake is kind of a different
term. In other words, each character class has very unique abilities that sometimes there's almost like little subsystems within the character class.
True.
Right? Have you ever noticed that?
Yeah.
So it's not like in AD&D. It's like it's very basic stuff. You need to like really kind of read your character class or your OCC in these games and write down what you can do, because if you don't, well, you're going to be kind of missing out on a lot of options.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So just know what your character can do and let the game master take care of the rest.
All right. Well, I think this is kind of like a good stopping point for the podcast, and we want to talk about the future for a little bit here. If you'd like to give us any feedback, obviously you can go on to Spotify or iTunes. Wow. Apple Podcasts. Sorry, that was a flashback from many years ago. Apple Podcasts, and you can obviously rate us there. But we prefer that you just contact us directly. I'll use my email address right now until we get a stable email address here. AsktheDM at theevildm.com is my email address. You can go to railgunsanddragons.com. And there is a contact form right there, which you can also fill out and, give us whatever comments or questions that you have for us, and we will read them on the air. Obviously, if we get ratings and reviews on one of the platforms, we'll try to read those on the air, because I like to go over those things and just tell people out there what the listeners are thinking. And everyone always likes to hear their name shouted out.
I know I do.
Exactly. So in the future, I think what we're going to do when we're sticking to fantasy is, I think the next episode we're going to kind of go over the races themselves and talk about the races themselves, what you can play, what you can't play, things like that. I mean, there's really not a lot of what you can't play, and then we're going to go over the classes in detail as well as we dive into those things. We might spend like an episode or two on like maybe just one class. And then again, we might spend an episode doing 5 classes. Who knows? It's going to flow into a natural conversation that Rob and I are going to have. And this is kind of one of those things that I want people to, I want to say, hey, Rob, you had a great podcast. I have it on the background while I'm painting minis. I like to listen to what you're talking about. That's smart. Or, hey, Rob, I was listening to your podcast when I went on my run. Man, you're really wrong about AD&D Second Edition. That is a horrible game.
Hey, and speaking of which, if you're interested in AD&D Second Edition, check out Rob Thaco Thoughts with Rob.
Exactly. Thaco Thoughts with Rob podcast out there. You can listen to Rob go on about how much he loves AD&D Second Edition. So, with all that said, we are going to head out. I hope you guys have a great time. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. More to come. We're going to release it on I want to say a weekly or a bi-weekly basis. We're not sure at the moment. We're going to, depending on the feedback of listeners. So we don't want to, go dive too fast and then, kind of burn out. We want to do it so it's kind of like conversation and we enjoy it and then you enjoy it. Right, Rob?
That is right, Vince.
Thank you. All right. We're heading out. We're going to say goodnight, everybody, and I hope you have a great time.
Bye, guys.